I'm going to talk about balancing rods and pistons, and I'm going to start off with Model T. I have a set of Model T rods that came from one of our vendors, prominent vendors. I'll go ahead and give him a plug, Ron's Machine Shop. Generally, they'll send me rods that are within 5 or 6 grams total overall weight. This morning, or what we want to try to accomplish today, is balancing the rods to where the rotating end, the big end, is the same weights, and that the wrist pin is the same. And so we'll go through a process using a rod balancer tool, and I'll get this set up with the scale underneath it, and we'll get it adjusted to where we can read the big end, read the small end, and we'll record that information over here and identify which is our lightest, and then we'll try to make find the lightest end, and then we'll try to make all of these the same weight as the lightest rod, and we'll identify which is the lightest end on the wrist pin side, and it won't necessarily be the same rod. At the rod, and I want to make sure that I got a good bond on the babbitt around, and that rod looks good. They've cut a reasonable. These are supposed to be standard, so the measurement would be 1/250, 1 inch, 250 thousandths to fit the scat crank that these would go on. So I want to just measure them. I haven't separated them or anything, so I should get it. And if we look at our micrometer, it's a 1 inch, and I'm reading 250, spot on. So that rod's correct in the size that I wanted it to be. I'm satisfied that we've got size is okay. I've got my scale. I want to just set these on here and record what the weight is. Okay, so this first rod says it's 601. I'm going to write that down here as total weight, and we'll see 597. So I'll write that down. Let's do the third one. 600. So we'll record that. Use 595. Ron's supplies us with some rods that are within 5 to 6 grams. And if you'll look at our numbers here, our lightest rod is 595, and our heaviest rod is 601. Clean them up, bolt them up, put them in an engine, and run on down the road. We're going to take this to a different level and see if we can balance these rods. Now, I'll be honest with you, it's sometimes rather difficult because of weight differences. If you've watched our videos, you know, we're a big fan of aligning and balancing. And I might refer you back to our original engine build video, which was it's 24 in the series, and it's the first part of that 24, which we talk about pistons and rods and balancing, and I checked the weights on them and said I didn't have a set of scales. So this is finishing up that part of my pistons that I'm going to use, and I'm going to set them down on the scale, and I'm going to record what the weight is of them, because there could be some differences. So this one is 711, 712. Okay, so I have a difference of 3 grams between the pistons. And remember, I said I had a difference of 5 grams over here. Mathematically, I could prove the heaviest piston with the lightest rod and the lightest piston with the heaviest rod And the whole weight of all this stuff is within a couple of grams of each other. And for probably the standard build, you could mix them up and come up with something that's within a few grams total, and stick it in an engine. And did it improve it? Maybe, maybe not, I don't know. But things would be within, overall weight of what's going up and down in there is within a couple of grams of each other. So that's even better. I'm 5 grams difference on the rods. If I work out the math right here, they'll all probably come out to be the same weight, or pretty close to it. So you could run them that way. So we've weighed our rods, we've weighed our pistons. So the next thing I want to talk about is this is a rod balancer. This happens to be from Speedway Motors. As you can see, we have an adjustable bar, a pivoting point, and then a plate that will set up on top of our scale. So let's just go ahead and do that right now. And we're going to slide this over kind of close, because one thing that you want to do is get these two, get the little pivot point out here the same height as what the scale is, and you also want to zero out the tear weight, or the weight of this. So I've got a little scale here. But if they are not level, the weight that'll show up on one end and on the other end, and then when you add those two weights together, it won't come up anywhere close to what our overall weight of the rods were. So I'll go ahead and set this up to do the big ends first. So this is my adapter, collet, if you would, that Bill made for a Model T. And got our collet on the scale. I've zeroed it out, and then I'll put the rod in the same orientation every time. Gently set it down on the scale, and then the pivot arm, where it is direct, it will affect the overall weights of these things. So I'm going to eyeball down through here and kind of square it up to my plate. That's pretty good. And this is number 1 rod, and the weight on the big end is 452, almost. Well, I saw a 453. We'll call it 452. One and a half grams. I'm going to record it as 452. So I'm going to go ahead and get my third rod weighed up here. Okay, so that one's 448. So far, this is really good, because we're only talking 4 grams. And our fourth rod, .456, 457. We'll call it 456. Okay, so the difference that I've got is from 448 on the big end to 456. So this is doable as far as the big end goes. So I'll set the scale, get this apart. I'm going to switch my mandrels around, my collets rather. Shelves backwards here. Here's number 4, like I said. And record that. That's 143, and that is rod number 4. 151. And here we go with number 2. 145. And our last rod is pretty good, 147. Okay, so worst case scenario is 7, 8 grams, 4 grams off of that, 2 grams off of that, and 7 grams off of that. So we'll go through that process of how we take the weight off. You can take the weight off of several different places. I'll probably start with the light ends and get them all the way the same, and we'll move out to a belt sander and go through that process. I would add one other additional comment on balancing rods. In our low RPM Model T engine, if things are so crazy, and we've got one here that's a little bit of a stretch maybe to get to, the important thing is to get the rotating mass the same weight. It would be nice if the reciprocating weight would all be the same. But if you run into a set of rods that you just can't do anything with, but you can get this straightened up, you're a lot better off than just off on this one. We can take off some of this and we can polish around on this side and get a little there and get a little there and maybe even a little here. So let's go see what we can do with this one. We may not get it. I've got a belt sander and I've got our number 3 rod. And we said this end of the rod is 8 grams too heavy. So I'm going to spend some time and try to grind off what looks like I'm getting close or whatever. And then we'll go back out and check it and just see where I'm headed on the thing. So I'm going to turn the belt sander on. It's going to get a little noisy for a while. And we'll see if we can get this rod lightened up. I'm also going to kind of protect with my glove as I'm doing this. I don't want to get that hot shower coming off of this belt. I just don't want the hot sparks off of it will bond. So I want to kind of protect that. So let's get started here and see what I can do. At any rate, you can see I'm trying to take a little bit off where the bolt would go through. This just torques down to about 25 pounds and it doesn't do anything but just hold the wrist pin in place. So as long as I got a couple 3 threads in there, it'll be fine. And we're just gonna check. That little bit of grinding that I've done, we're at 149, we started off at 151. So I have removed 3 grams off of it. Get another rod up here, you can see that I haven't taken just a whole lot off of the top. We'll do another swipe at it, kind of sneak up on it. Would also point out that grinding at the extreme, the end of it, is really where you'll get the most benefit. You know, coming down and grinding in here, you might get a gram off, but it probably won't change the overall weight to where we can measure. So most of this dressing's got to be up through here. So let's see if we can do some more here. So, took some off of here. And like I said, you'll get more results getting out here on the end of things rather than coming down into this area. But we can go down in there, but it takes a lot more material to remove. And so far I haven't taken off that much. The bolts will work just fine. That looks pretty level. Well, okay, I'm 146, just got a gram. Within 5 of where I need to be. So after another round of grinding with a brand new belt on it, it got aggressive. 142, 143. I bet you I'm 142 and a half. Okay, 142 is what we're going to call it. And so gram off of that one, 3 grams off of that one, 5 grams off of that one. And then we started off with 151 as our heaviest. We made it 142. 142, 142, 142. So all the little ends now are the same weight. So we're going to reverse the process. 2 and 6 is 8. I got to get 8 grams off of this. So that's going to be probably taking off quite a bit of this part of the rod and maybe polishing out here on the edges. Now, I want to come up with some means of protecting this babbitt a little better. I might pack it full of paper towels or something, because I don't want the shower or sparks getting in. So I want to, for the big end mandrel, or collet, on here, and I want to zero out just so we got it. And that's our end for the wrist pin. And we've got our lightest rod was number 3. That's this one. And so our goal is to get all of these to 448. And if I go slow enough, maybe I won't do that. So number 4 rod here is 456. So I've got 6 and 2 is 8. I got about 8 to take off of that one. I'm going to stick a little piece of paper towel in here. See if I can set it on fire as we omit showers. But basically, I'm going to come in here and see what I can get off of this area. And I'll do quite a bit of grinding right across there, and then we'll come in and weigh it. Again, alright, so I'm at 450 and I want to get to 448. So I'm going to go back out and take some more material off of it. I'll show you what I've done so far. Is I've just taken off a little bit on the ribs, and so I'm going to go take a little more. I'm at 450 and I've got about 2 grams that I want to take off that. So I'm just going to touch it lightly and come back in here and weigh it again. .448. So I'm happy with that one. We'll call that one good. So this was our number 4 rod that we've got to the target of 448, and all that I've done is I've just come in here and removed material off of the rib. And you can see there's still a lot of rib left, so it isn't like we took off just a tremendous amount of product, steel to get it. So that's, this is a good one. Another way of doing this would be drills, okay? You know, there's places that you can drill in here. I've seen that done. If they're as close as what these are, just grind off a little bit. It doesn't hurt anything. There is no, this part of the cap is just keeping the piston from popping out the top of the head. So, you know, all the pressure is up here on the top part, so to speak. 3 is the one that we've matched up to, so we don't have to do any more work to it. And the other 2 rods, 1 and 2, are weighing 452. We want to go to 448, so it's just 4 grams. So we've got to come off these areas here. And so here's our 4th rod. We're 448, 449. We're so damn close. We'll call it good enough. 448. So we've got all of our big ones balanced. We got all of our big ends balanced. We've got all of our small ends balanced. And we're ready to move on to the next part of this, which would be checking these rods to make sure that they're not bent or twisted. And we'll be using 2 techniques. One, I'll use my rod checker and show you how I go about that, and then setting up on a lathe as an alternative method. I've got a shaft here that we're going to use for a rod straightener, and it's exactly 1 inch 250. So it won't slide in to these rods, so I need to break them loose to where I can get that to go. And when you're taking these loose, you need to clamp on the big end on both sides. Taking these apart, you can twist them. And so we've got a nice solid means of being able to hold that. So this is a Taylor aligner. They're hard to find, but they do come available from time to time. To do this, we need to have a wrist pin. I'll borrow a wrist pin, and we're going to get a wrist pin bolt. And the wrist pin goes in, and I'm going to pinch that down. And I'm going to go ahead and just run this down snug. So what we're going to check for is 2 things. The guide, the checker portion, has horizontal and vertical. And so I'm going to run the wrist pin up into here to where it sits flush, makes contact, and then take a feeler gauge and see if I can slide that feeler gauge underneath anywhere. And if I can, then I'm going to bend or twist that rod accordingly. So I've got a little feeler gauge, and I'm just going to push down on it, and I'm checking to see how far. Alright, so this side is going in, it's fine, and on the left side it's fine this way, but looky there, it'll slide right in. So this wrist pin horizontally is fine, but vertically, in other words this way, this end's lower than this end, so this would be cocked. So I need to correct that. And how we're going to do that is with an alignment tool, a punch, and I'm going to pry down on this end. Just an alignment tool. I'm going to bring it up. I'm going to do this all right here in the machine and put a little pressure on it. Sometimes it doesn't take much, and then other times I can put about all the weight I've got on it to bend one. Okay, so see, my feeler gauge is not going down in there. So what I do to this side? Oop, went too far. Okay, so back up and don't put as much pressure on it. Okay there. Okay there. Okay there. And okay there. So, in theory, the wrist pin is now parallel to the crankshaft pin. And remember, these were brand new rods from from a good vendor. But it just works out that way, guys. We might go through the rest of them and not find one that's bent. So, we'll take this apart and move on to another rod. Kind of center up my wrist pin again, pull it back. Now let's check this one. That's okay. That's okay. That's maybe just a little off. Yeah, it's just a touch off. Yeah, I can get it through there. So this one, this direction's fine, but it's twisted this way. So let's fix that. So I got a little chunk of aluminum that I stick up in here as I'm trying not to tear up that surface. And I'll put my punch in here and we're just going to twist. And you can see it moves a little bit. Quite a bit actually. Okay, 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 and okay. So we've got that rod adjusted. So we've had 2 of the 4. Yep, okay, so that completes our checking everything's parallel in alignment. We're going to rig up the lathe to test it a different way. I said earlier I'd show you a different method of checking rod alignment. This is a Model A rod, 1.5" with a 1-inch wrist pin, and it consists of a couple of upright pieces and some tooling, tool steel, and a 1-inch rod shaft through the wrist pin, and some means of resting it. And what the technique is that I'm going to measure 15 inches away from the rod. So if I get a measurement that's within an hour or 2 or even maybe 3 out here, by the time you move in 15 inches, that's a real small number. So we're going to use a set of calipers and just come in here and measure the distance in between our shaft. And there's a little bit of wiggle and jiggle in this thing, but not much. And so I'm 605.8, and wow, I'm not even touching thousandths. So there's quite a bit of difference between these. So the theory is that this is further away and this is closer in. So we're going to use this leverage of this bar, and we're going to bend that rod and then remeasure. But let's see what we got here. Yeah, I moved it some. Okay, I'm at 6 inches, 171 thousandths. 6 inches rather, 334. So still got a long ways to go. Yeah, I moved it too much. Maybe not. That's 242 on that end, and I'm 248 on this end. That's within 6 thousandths. We'll call that good, and we'll check it when we're done here. So that should have got things set up this way. So now we need to check it this way, and what we've got is a couple of stops, and we're just a little bit of a gap on that end, and this end's at least maybe a little bit more than an eighth. So I'll bring the bar back here, and I'm going to twist it now this way. Alright, I just touched that in, and now I overdid it. I don't think I'll get it much better than that. So I'll just verify this again just to make sure. 6,251 and 6,250, 248. That's within just a couple of 3 thousandths. Let me run it back up here again and just see if we're still happy here. Looks pretty dadgum good to me. Everything fits in. That's as good as I would have done it on this thing earlier. All the rods that you're going to get from a vendor, most generally you're going to find at least one, maybe two in that box that just aren't exactly right. Now, is that a problem? Yeah, can be, especially when we're putting these in new scat rods where the fillets, the radius is on the rods fit the crank tighter. On reground Model T cranks, there's usually quite a bit of slop in it, so if it was off just a skosh, may not cause a problem. But I would always recommend that you check the rods. They're going to be bent, unfortunately. The rods, we got them all weighing the same. Now it's time to move on to the pistons. But it occurred to me that maybe we don't want to go through all this exercise. We have a spread on the pistons of 5 grams, and if we hadn't balanced the rods, we got a spread on them of 6 grams. So if you would go through and for the heaviest piston to the lightest rod and so on right down through the course, you would have about a 4 gram spread on a reciprocating weight. If by chance you just grabbed and start putting them together. In this case, if you got the two heavies together and the two lightest together, you'd have an 11-gram spread. So minimally, it probably would be a good idea to know what this weight is and try to match them up the best that you can. But we're going to go ahead and finish balancing these pistons. We're going to move over to the lathe and remove some weight off of the skirt. Probably a couple of runs out it. In theory, we know what to take off, perhaps, but we're going to make a first pass at this thing and then weigh the piston and see how close it is to our calculation. And then come back over here and hopefully finish it up on the second pass. But what I've done is I've got the, in a 3-jaw, I've got the piston clamped in, and I've just taken part of a lid off of a shoebox and cut me off some pieces of cardboard. I didn't want the jaws to be digging into the ring grooves. You know, if you put some little nicks on there, that's going to cause some issues with the rings. So this will protect it, and I just wanted to verify that it did center up, and it's just a wiggling and a jiggling. So pretty happy with that. We'll get a cutter on here and start making some very light passes. I don't know how aggressive I can get with it, but the piston's in pretty secure. So let's get a cutter out here rigged up, and we've got us a cutter. Cutter set up. We have a theoretical figure that's supposed to get us a couple of grams, and so I'm going to take off about 26 thousandths, and we'll weigh everything and see if our math is working out, and then we'll have to adjust our thought process from there. So let's touch off, and then I'm going to zero out the tool a wee bit and just see what happens. I don't want to get to about 10 thousandths here. And I'm going to go out, that would be about 35 total. You want to go slow here because you don't want to bite. You don't want to flip that piston out. Okay, so let's go weigh it and just see how we're doing here. So we've taken off 2 grams roughly in our 30 thousandths cut. And so I need to go probably at least another 20 and check it again. That would get us close to 2 grams. And I'll take off 30. That's pretty close to 30. Let's go weigh it again and see if we're sneaking up on it. I'm at 713. I'm within 1 gram of where we want to end up. So we'll take off just a wee bit here. Let's take it out and go weigh it and see if we aren't happy. And it switches over to 713, so we're so dadgum close. We're out of having one that read in tenths. I'm going to call that good. That's 712. So we've got another piston that's 716, just a gram lighter than that one that we started. We'll put that up in the lathe and get it turned down to our target of 712. Well, this is our last piston, and our target was 712, and that's 712. So all 4 of our pistons, some material was removed off the skirt In the worst case scenario, it was about 50 to 60 thousandths. But that was the worst case. So there's a little difference in them, but we didn't take enough off to affect the piston as far as rocking and stuff. You got to remember, we run modern pistons in them that are, you know, just totally different. This happens to be for a Model A rod, but, you know, look at the skirt difference, and modern pistons just don't have a whole lot of skirt down there. So I think we're happy with that, and this would be ready to assemble these in any order because they all weigh the same, and our rods all weigh the same. So it's just a matter of when I get ready to assemble the engine, just grab a piston and put it all together. And we have now rotating mass is the same weight, the wrist pin is the same weight, the overall weight of the rod is the same, and the pistons weigh the same. That's how you balance rods and pistons.